Good afternoon
Realize.
and welcome to this week's M&G Live Hangout. I'm Franaz Parker, and this week we're talking about the medium-term budget policy statement released by Treasury this week. I think the big talking point, probably because it was so easy for people to relate to, was actually those cuts that Pravin Gordhan announced for civil servants. You know, the obvious ones like no more credit cards, no more business class flights. No more paying for expensive cars, no more booze paid for by the taxpayers. And that got a lot of people talking. Thalia, or what did you make of those revelations?
I guess a lot of people are kind of suggesting that it was a cheap electioneering shot, and there has been a lot of sort of talk or suggestion about that. But Pravin Gordhan obviously has defended that and said this is part of a 4-year plan that they have been rolling out, and they sort of just upped the ante in the past little while.
So people are pretty cynical. Do you think it is just window dressing? Do you think, elections are coming up in just a few months? They're just around the corner, and the ruling party is trying to really show that they're cutting costs. I mean, Gordhan said this could save billions. I mean, why didn't they save these billions 5 years ago?
Well, I have to say I probably join the ranks of the slightly skeptical in terms of the timing. I do think that it's interesting, and it's come at a time when people are sort of economically very sensitive. We know the country as a whole has become economically more sort of sensitive to knocks per se than it has been historically or over the past few years. And so I think the timing was apt. It remains to be seen also how quickly this decision is actually rolled out and whether we'll actually see the effects of it before the new budget next year in February.
What were some of the more surprising things that came out of his speech and the budget allocations?
Of course, they did speak about unspent money, and this happens every year. So on a national level, over 750 million rand was rolled over from unspent balances, and then at a provincial level, 3 billion rand was rolled over. So the national level, the unspent amounts were rather low, and at a provincial level, we're seeing sort of still comparatively high-ish figures that are being rolled over as unspent funds, and of course that always creates a lot of backlash, so to speak.
Well, one of the things that was pointed out in our paper was that government debt is climbing, and that expenditure has overtaken revenue. As someone who doesn't have a strong handle on business issues, why is that? I mean, why is debt climbing? How can we be spending more than we're getting in? Surely you can just say no.
And I guess it speaks to the fact that we are importing a lot more than we're exporting. So until that situation is sort of at least balanced out a little more, or hopefully reversed, we're going to be sort of hemorrhaging money. And we've seen with the weakening rand and the talk of tapering and that kind of thing, we've seen the situation worsen, and obviously, added to the fact that our productivity has decreased over the past year, we've seen the situation worsening, and so the whole import-export balance has put us kind of out of kilter, so to speak.
He spoke about an employment tax incentive bill, which has been revised and will be formally introduced, and then a jobs fund, and looking at initiating a public works program that could create 970,000 jobs and training positions. But I mean, these are things that we've heard them all before. It just seems like they never really either happen or have the impact that we think they will. So, I mean, is there any reason to believe this will be any different?
Look, I think there is. I mean, I think the fact that they pushed the youth subsidy proposal through, despite opposition from COSATU, is an indication of how desperate the situation is. And I think we need to keep in mind that Pravin Gordhan comes from SARS originally, from the South African Revenue Service. He understands the tightness of the budget they're having to deal with. This is a man who understands money, and I mean, he understands that without growth, we are simply not going to get anything off the ground. And as I said, his position on government, as much as it's amusing to think that they're not going to have access to credit cards and they have to fly business class and so on, the fact that he's so desperate to talk about moving Parliament to Pretoria to cut costs is an indication of the extent to which they are looking everywhere to cut back.